Welcome back to Capitol Review. I'm Mark Hall. President Trump says the ceasefire is over, at least for now, but they will continue to strike Iran, but he's not ruled out talks in the future. Now prices at the pump are starting to creep up, and that could mean more belt tightening for American families. And joining us now on Capitol Review, Dr. Omekongo Dibinga, political science professor at American University, and also the founder of Upstander International, and Colin Reed, a Republican strategist and principal at D.C.-based consulting firm South and Hill. Gentlemen, welcome back to Capitol Review.
Hey, Mark.
Thanks for having us.
We're always glad to have you. A lot of ground to cover. Let's get started. Professor, let's start with you. The ceasefire appears to be over for now with Iran. Your reaction?
Well, my reaction is I'm not going to use the language of the administration as it relates to how this war is going in Iran. The fact of the matter is there's never been a ceasefire. Every weekend, it seems like there's some type of a new missile that's being launched, another boat that's being targeted. There's never been a ceasefire. And so even with the idea of a ceasefire, what did Trump say? A ceasefire in that area of the world is where people just don't shoot as much. I mean, this war has been a failure from the beginning. And I believe that Trump has launched us into another forever war, something that he campaigned that he was never going to do.
Colin, when you have missiles going back and forth, it's tough to come up with an agreement. What's your reaction to the latest?
For 47 years, Mark, this situation has bedeviled presidents of both political parties and the world, and especially the allies in the region. And now we're seeing why it's such a sticky wicket. And look, ultimately, this remains where it has been from the beginning of the conflict. There's been a lot of start and stops along the way. The president really now faces two choices. One, he can allow the Iranians to control the Strait of Hormuz and essentially charge a toll on 1/5 of the world's oil supply, and that's no good. Or he can retake the Strait of Hormuz by force, and that presents its own problems as well. So ultimately, there's no easy answers here, and there's a reason why this situation has been so complicated to resolve. But ultimately, the idea that we could just sit back and allow the world's largest state sponsor of terror and who's inflicted so much harm and damage to their own people and everyone else's to sit by and do nothing, that's not really a situation we can abide by either.
Colin, a lot of layers here. How can a deal get done?
Well, that remains the million-dollar question, and I think you saw the president express some frustration this week about the Iranian regime, and I think it's really important to distinguish between the leaders of the regime and the people, because the leaders of that regime have inflicted great horrors and harm to their own people who have dared speak out against them as well. So, look, there's no easy answer here right now, and this is what the next few weeks are going to bring.
Dr. Dibinga, does President Trump have an off-ramp?
He doesn't really have an off-ramp because he doesn't know what he wants to do in any way, shape, or form. He talks about so many different reasons why he even started the war. You know, before they can't have nuclear weapons, I've been for the Iranian people to rise up. He doesn't know what he's doing, and he thought this was going to go as quickly as what happened in Venezuela, and that is just not simply the issue. And so really when we're talking about at the end of the day is how much more are the American people going to continue to suffer over this man's war of choice? He's abandoned his NATO allies. He's abandoned so many people throughout the world. He was just talking down about Spain the other day, and now he's mad, saying that they're not coming to help him in this war of choice. So I feel like we are in a quagmire right now that is going to be really hard to get out of under this leadership.
Dr. Dibinga, midterms approaching, some races getting national attention, perhaps for the wrong reasons. Recently, Maine Democrat Senate candidate Graham Plattner suspended his campaign after disturbing allegations continued to hamper his efforts. Should Republican Ken Paxton in Texas, who's also facing serious allegations, do the same thing?
Well, what Republicans should do, particularly as it relates to guys like Ken Paxton, they just refuse to listen to us because the double standard is absolutely ridiculous. Graham Plattner, he brought this on himself, and he should be out of the race. He should have never been in the race because the vetting process was terrible. But the Republicans, they just live by a completely different standard. I mean, we're talking about a man who's in office who's been convicted and who was convicted of sexual abuse, and he's in office. You look at Ken Paxton right now and all of his indiscretions, in addition to his flawed policies that have been hurting the regular people of Texas. He has no business being in office. But it seems like with the Republicans being involved in some sexual abuse, sexual assault allegations, whether we're talking about Hegseth, Kavanaugh, whether we're talking about Trump, it seems like it's part of the plan in terms of getting yourself to office.
Colin, your response.
Well, look, Ken Paxton's no angel, and that's a reason a lot of people had hoped that John Cornyn would be the nominee, so this race would be off the table, and he's going to have to answer for that. But let's be really clear here. Graham Plattner was credibly accused of rape, and that is what finally got Democratic leaders to say he can't be in this race. But let's look back at what they were okay with. They were okay with a Nazi tattoo. They were okay with this guy lurking on these creepy websites doing God knows what. They were okay with allegations of sexual misconduct when they were brought up by a conservative or Republican woman. It's only when a liberal woman brought up these allegations that they asked him to get out of the race, not because they wanted to do it, because they had to do it and they had no other choice. And that just speaks to their just desperation to be able to try and beat Susan Collins. And it's really disgraceful.
Gentlemen, it's going to be an interesting race to November. Professor Omekongo Dibinga and Colin Reed, thank you very much for joining us.